Hello and welcome to our webinar today. In conversation with Ingrid Pope, Creating Space to Think, Work and Live. In her new book, Ingrid takes us beyond clearing out cupboards. She explores how physical, mental and emotional clutter are holding us back and how we can reclaim our attention, our time and our agency. So, Ingrid, the book says, imagining stepping off the relentless treadmill and creating some space, giving yourself time to slow down and more energy to handle everything life throws at you. So, what does creating space really mean in today's context of busyness and overload?
Yes, creating space, when we imagine space, we think about the physical space. But of course, the type of space I speak about is headspace, to think a bit more clearly. And you talk about busyness. It feels like everyone I meet and I speak to, you start the conversation, hello, how are you? I'm busy. Everything is really busy, and it continues to be busy. And when we are in that state, that can be really satisfying because we tick things off and we feel like we're really productive and active. And it means that there is a lot of stuff we don't get to where we need quiet thinking time. And that is what I tend to refer to when I talk about creating space. I talk about creating headspace for that deep thinking, for that longer term planning, for the strategic thinking within organizations, for all of this reflective work that we just tend to not get to.
So that becomes the decluttering habit. You talk about clutter in more than just the physical sense. So, what do you mean? And you just mentioned it again there, mental or emotional clutter, and what
Mm.
like, and possibly sort of thinking about our audience today. So, we could be addressing people on the move, relocating, dual career couples. We could be talking about a big a business leader with a tricky problem they want to resolve, or it could be global mobility professionals who are thinking how are they going to best support families on the move.
Mm. Yes. So we talked a little bit about the mental clutter and how that might interfere with maybe the deeper strategic thinking, or maybe the attention to look after people in a slightly better way than we perhaps tend to do when we're constantly rushing and running. We talk about looking after people and having really good relationships with people, leading people for people within organizations, or maybe people who are on the move, listening, amongst the chaos of a move, listening to what the kids are saying or what the partner is saying, and giving that some attention so people feel heard. I think a lot of the headspace in a relationship sense is giving others the sense that they are heard and listened to, because I think that that's a real luxury nowadays. But yes, I also talk about emotional clutter. And regardless of the type of clutter that I talk about, I'm always really clear that the key is not to get rid of, because we need to be holding things in our minds. We need to have a lovely home and surround ourselves with things that make us smile and make us feel happy. I'm not talking minimalism and getting rid of everything. What I'm talking about is really paying attention to what we're carrying, and I talk about what's in our landscape. And that also means our emotions. And our emotions are really powerful things. They drive everything in terms of behaviors. And especially when we are perhaps overworked, when perhaps we haven't slept enough and our stress levels are rising, regardless of the circumstances. But then we have fewer resources to regulate how we respond to things and regulate our emotions. So I talk about our emotional clutter in the sense of, when is it that our emotions get in our way and perhaps hold us back? perhaps interfere with how, having good relationships with others, be it at home or in a work capacity, being able to handle change really well. When do fears creep in that when we don't acknowledge them properly, they can really trip us up? So that's what I refer to.
Hmm. And then you also talk about the actual clutter, lists of never ending mess, space as well wearing you down. When do you get to that personal turning point? I mean, maybe something triggered that, and which is why you wrote Uncluttered in the first place.
Yes, and I think it was an observation over a period of time, watching how things were shifting and changing a little bit. So previously, I was in the corporate space for a number of years and seeing how the accumulation of projects and the accumulation of responsibilities with perhaps not quite enough resources to handle everything really well meant that time was compressed. We had to make decisions faster, perhaps without being able to take the time to properly process all the data available. So already paying attention a little and seeing how actually some decisions were being made that were not the best decisions for the organization, for the people within it around. Instead of being an observer in that and thinking, there's got to be a better way. And then also from a kind of personal perspective, noticing what the impact is of technology and all our devices and being switched on all the time. And there's a lot, of course, that's already been written and read, written about this and researched in this space. But noticing how, for myself, I found it increasingly difficult when in a conversation with someone, they would pick up their phone every 5 seconds. Oh, let me show you this. Oh, let me look this up real quick, and let me show you this picture, and how that interrupted a communication flow, a train of thought, equality in the relationship and in the moment and in that exchange. So noticing all these different things, and of course also physically when your place is a mess and it feels disruptive, then we can do something about that. So I think I've come at it from different angles, and for each one of them, there were various turning points for me.
Hmm. So, what about the habits you talk about? And is that what you're trying to do? Get people to adopt uncluttered, uncluttering as a habit?
Um, So yeah, often there are two phases. There's the one-off kind of, oh, this is a mess, let me unclutter. And then there's and how do I make sure it doesn't get cluttered again?
Mm.
And in terms of habits, so I've developed a 5-step decluttering method for, how do we go about actually doing this? And I think that the first step is really the key and the one that I would love to see everyone adopt as a habit, which is survey. Survey what you're carrying, survey what's in your landscape, become an observer and pay attention. Notice your behavior, notice what you're doing, notice what you're carrying in your head whilst you're speaking to someone else. And that's the starting point for anything, really. And then choose. Find your agency again, and you choose where you want to put your focus and your attention and your time.
Mm.
So those are really that's the biggest message really in terms of habits.
Right. So, do you want to talk a little bit more about the model?
I can do, yes. So the model can be applied to every type of clutter. And as I just mentioned, the first step is to survey, to just look. And that might sound really simple, but that's probably one of the most difficult things to do, because what I've certainly encountered with all the people that I've worked with, either in a one-to-one capacity or within a group training course, is there's a real fear to looking and to really facing our behaviors. Or even quite often, if we're talking about physical clutter, there's there's a real shame and guilt attached to that. And so a desire to sort of make it disappear and not want to look at it. But until we actually look at it and we know what we're dealing with, we can't do anything. And then the next parts of the method are, of course, to decide, well, okay, if this is my starting point, if this is the result of my survey, this is everything I have in my landscape or that I'm carrying in my mind or that the emotions that get in my way, what do I want instead?
Mm.
And then once we've determined what's our starting point and where do we want to get to, then it's moving to action, one little step at a time. And I'm also very big on celebration, which is step 4 of the method. I know, but bear with me because we're all really good at seeing all the stuff we haven't done yet. We're great at looking at the one item on our list of 27 that we have not completed. And what I would love to encourage everyone is to celebrate all the little things that you have done to
Mhm.
balance them against the, yeah, okay, of course there's still stuff you need to do. But also don't forget that you've done all of this because we tend to not pay attention to that.
No, that's really good advice, I think. And what other you patterns did you start to notice? Because you mentioned that earlier.
Mm. So one of the big challenges, I think, when we talk about busyness and we look at the world the way it is today, and we look at the workplaces as they are, and we look at the expectations that perhaps others put on us, but even more importantly, that we put on ourselves, I think that there's a real tie-in with our identity and our busyness. And then what can happen is who we are is somehow measured against how busy we are. And if we take away some of that busyness and we've created space, then that becomes something scary. Because then who are we if we're not busy?
Hmm.
Then maybe we need to look at, well, maybe what else is important to us? Who are we really? And there are a lot of patterns around that, around filling free time, because there's a fear around, well, what else? Who are we when we're not running after something, chasing something, organizing something? And both in a kind of professional capacity and in a personal capacity. I've noticed since I've become self-employed, I've had to give myself permission to spend an hour to sit and read something during a weekday. And that was a really interesting process for me. And so there's a real deconditioning that needs to happen around what the expectations are around who we are and how we spend our time.
Mm. So, how do you help teams and leaders then to apply these ideas in in their professional lives, and especially
Mm.
in the hybrid and digital workspace, because that creates its own difficulties, doesn't it? And perhaps less structure, plus possibly more time to pile up things.
Yes, and I think it all comes back to, or the starting point is always that survey piece. So as a team, where are we spending our time and what are our working practices? What regular meetings do we have in the calendar that potentially don't are only there by default? I talk a lot about organizational clutter. So the what are the meetings that are unnecessary? What are the processes potentially that are unnecessary? How are we protecting silos, which means that we're all just working on our one little piece and we're not looking at what the next group is looking at. So really as a team and as an organization, what are we doing? And is that what we should be doing? Where are we spending most of our time? And from an emotional perspective, what emotions are our ways of working bringing up? And you talk about hybrid. How happy are people at work, working in a hybrid way? How can we make this work for everyone? And everyone is different. So somebody will love it and somebody else will hate it. And how do we accommodate the two? And how, first of all, do we allow even the conversation to happen? And that's where my work comes in, which is let's have the conversation. Let's have an open conversation and air everything. Because sometimes also what we find is we've got these little pockets of people getting really worked up about stuff unnecessarily because they're spending hours on reports that nobody reads. So
Yeah.
stop writing those reports. You know, because these things are perpetuated throughout time within an organization. And unless we actually just unpick things, and of course, what we need for that, and this is so ironic because we need the time to voice all these things and to air these things. Yet, because everyone is so busy and because we have no resources, we couldn't possibly take the time.
Mm.
So, very often when we're at our most busy, that is when it's the most important to just stop for a moment and to look at what we're doing and to consider, is this the right thing? And maybe it is. Maybe we don't have a choice, but then at least we'll know that.
Mm. And I understand you have workshops as well that people can.
Mm,
So tell us a bit about that. Is that dealing with
yeah.
teams or are they?
So actually, the book
Yeah.
came after the book is based on a training course, a 3-month program that I developed. So that came first, and that's mainly for individuals, um, and can be run, of course, also within organizations for particular teams. And that looks at 6 different types of clutter and starts with the, oh, well, how do we even create space in our diaries? How do we create the time we need to do this work? And then it goes into all manner of different types of clutter, the physical, the mental, also the digital. There's a whole module around digital clutter. And then also ourselves. It then goes into the slightly deeper personalities, ourselves, what are the different roles we play and which ones of those are still useful. And that is where all my coaching expertise comes in, working with the individuals, what used to serve us in the past, what behaviors and reactions and ways of being served us in the past, and perhaps some of those don't serve us anymore. So let's just notice those and see, well, what else would serve us better instead.
No, well, it's really a delightful book, and people will be able to see here. But there are some absolutely lovely drawings in there as well, and I'm sure you'll sort of recognise that it's a very easy book to dip into, and then you've got summaries at the end, and whether you're doing it from a personal perspective or whether from a work context, you can take something away from this. So congratulations on the book. I think it's really a really good step, and I could certainly deal with you here, welcome you here to unpick my clutter after 30 years of working in the
Mm.
publishing sector. But
I'll
thank
pop round, Fiona.
wave a magic wand. But yes, so how do people get in touch? What would you like them to do? And how do they order
Mm.
the book?
Well, so to get in touch with me quite easily on LinkedIn, Ingrid Pope, I'm on LinkedIn, or else also on my website, which is creating-space.co. And there's a page on there for the book of where you can find the book and where you can buy it. It's on all major platforms. So Uncluttered and my name, Ingrid Pope, finds it on Amazon, on worldbooks.org, on foils, Waterstones, everywhere. It's also available in Kindle and audio. It's because I learned a lot of people visibly listen to audio. So you can hear me read it out if that's your preferred way of taking in information. And do reach out. You can sign up on my website. I have a newsletter you can sign up to as well if you want to just be kept up to date with what's happening in my world.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Ingrid, and congratulations on the book again.
Thank you.
And for guiding us through that space that isn't a luxury, it's a real necessity, as you say, whether it's spaces in our minds, our homes, or at work. Uncluttered gives us permission and the tools to clear away the noise and live with purpose, as you say in the book. And I think that's a very good thing to celebrate. So, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I've been talking to Ingrid Pope, the author of Uncluttered, How to Create Space to Think, Work and Live. I'm Fiona Murchie, Managing Editor of Relocate Global and Think Global People, and you can find out more about our resources on thinkglobalpeople.com and Relocate magazine relocateglobal.com. So please help yourself to useful facts and mini fact sheets, as well as our newsletters and digital publications. Thank you for joining us.